we said, well, why don't you try out like South America? Where can you fly these drones autonomously and not have to deal with regulation? And it turns out you could actually do that in South America. And say, well, why don't you explore that or another country which would allow you to do that? And a company that would be clever in that dimension would be very interesting to us.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 177. Where can young startup companies go to find capital and clients to grow their business? If you ask today's guest, he would say DreamIt. Bob Stasio is the managing director of DreamIt SecureTech. Dreamit Ventures is a fund focused on startups with early traction that are ready to scale. In the last 10 years, DreamIt has invested in 300 startups now worth over $3 billion. The fund invests in HealthTech, UrbanTech, and smart city technology. In 2018, DreamIt launched SecureTech, targeting logical, social, and physical security startups. Before joining DreamIt, Bob held multiple roles at IBM Security, leading efforts in cyber operations and threat analysis. Prior to IBM, Bob worked in the private sector, leading threat intelligence programs at Bloomberg and global financial firms. He also has deep government experience, having held positions at NSA Cyber Center, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Army Signals Intelligence Corps, the FAA, and NASA. Bob served as a U.S. Army officer and is a recipient of numerous military awards, including the Bronze Star and the Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal. He serves on several advisory boards of multiple startups, holds various technical certifications, and is highly regarded in the cybersecurity industry. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Bob talks about DreamIt SecureTech, its unique program to securing funding and clients, and how drone startups can be part of the next cohort. You asked and I delivered. Many of you have wanted to donate in support of my podcast, but didn't want to commit to a monthly subscription. So now you have the option of making a one-time donation in any amount by going to droneradioshow.com/donate. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the costs of production and keep the podcast going and growing. And if you want to make a monthly donation, you can still go to patreon.com/droneradioshow. And now let's learn about funding opportunities from Bob Stasio of DreamIt SecureTech. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Bob to introduce himself.
I'm Bob Stasio. I'm the managing director for SecureTech at Dreamit Ventures.
Bob, what is DreamIt and SecureTech?
So SecureTech is one of the divisions of Dreamit Ventures, and we have two other verticals within Dreamit. We have a HealthTech vertical and an UrbanTech vertical. And at Dreamit Ventures, we're a venture capital fund, but we also give a whole lot of other value to the companies that we look at. So we go through and screen about 300 companies per vertical twice a year. And we select from that about 5 to 10 in each vertical. So basically the top 3% or so, and put them through a really intensive 14-week program to help them get more customers, get more traction, and then eventually get them in front of investors to help them close a round, usually a Series A round, which we also participate in. So very unique type of structure and venture capital fund. And the division I run is SecureTech, which focuses on what I call logical, physical, and social type of security.
Can you give us some examples of what you mean by that?
The logical side is basically cybersecurity, either a physical hardware or a software. So that's usually security type offerings that would help the security operations center, generally in an enterprise type organization like a Fortune 1000 organization. Generally speaking, that's who we're targeting, that type of customers in that space. In the physical security side, we're looking at really essentially protection of people and property. So that could be things like drones or imagery analysis or entry management, door entry management, that type of thing. It could be a pretty broad realm in the physical side. And then in the social side, that's kind of an interesting one as well. That's basically the protection of human speech, if you will, or it's a analysis of the human dimension of communication. And that could be things like fraud analysis or protection against fake news or misinformation dissemination, that type of thing. So those are kind of the broad categories of companies that we look for.
There are a number of accelerators in the marketplace. In your mind, what makes SecureTech stand out?
We actually don't even like to use the word accelerator anymore. Because it's just so different than an accelerator, where a typical accelerator will have you relocate to a location for a certain period of time, and it's relatively light touch, and it puts you through kind of a prescripted program where you may have kind of mentors assigned to you from other organizations, but there's a bit of diffusion of responsibility. And generally, when you enter into a accelerator, they would maybe offer you, say, $60,000 to $100,000 for a pretty large stake in your company, maybe a 7-8% stake in the company. So for us, from the monetization aspect, we don't actually put money in up front to the company. We actually put the company through all the great stuff that we send them through, and then we put money in, right? And only if the company closes a round of funding or opens a round of funding, we reserve the right to put money in. And most of the companies that come into DreamIt are a little more mature. So if they would take the deal, which I previously described at other accelerators, that would actually be a down round for them. Generally, the companies we have coming in are between about $500K and $1 million a year in revenue. They really want to get to the point where they can scale and really kind of hockey stick where they're at and get a couple more enterprise customers and get in front of the right investors. Also, in our program itself, it's mostly a remote program. We treat people kind of like adults, if you will. It's not your typical accelerator where you have to relocate somewhere for 14 weeks, because we found that a lot of our entrepreneurs in our programs are a bit older. They have families, they have kids. Like, I'm not going to leave my kids for 14 weeks and move to Austin. That's just not going to happen. So we actually kind of tailor and make our program very specific to the entrepreneurs that come in. And most of the program is actually involving traveling to customers, where we've set up meetings where we actually help attend in most cases, or also traveling to investors. So it's a much more bespoke, hands-on program where we're very much in with the company's day-to-day. And it's also a very different monetary model that's basically a win-win for both the company and the investor.
Can you tell us more about the customer immersions and the investor roadshows? How do they fit into the overall program?
Sure. So those are kind of I call them the two pillars or tent poles of the DreamIt program. So the first one that the companies go through or the startups go through, is a customer immersion. So we have a few dozen customer immersion partners that have agreed to work with us and see our startups. And it varies in how this works per vertical, but in the cyber world and the security world, these are pretty much chief information security officers, CISOs, or that level of person that want to see startups. They kind of may want to see what the hard problems are being solved by startups, or they're a little frustrated by the status quo in the industry. So they're very supportive and want to see startups, want to see what the best solutions are out there. And we set up meetings with these folks, with these immersion partners, where our startups have about a 15, 20-minute pitch to that CISO, to that decision maker, to get feedback, one, from that person, but also to potentially move into like a pilot or a POC if there's in fact interest in continuing the conversation and moving things along. So that's a very helpful thing, because it's very much win-win on both sides. The startups love it because they get in touch with some decision makers at big companies. These are large Fortune 500 companies, or even government organizations in some cases, that are very well connected to DreamIt. So the customers love it and the startups love it too.
So that gives companies that are in the cohort an opportunity to find out what the customer base might want, or maybe nurture a client or customer early on.
Yeah, it gives them the ability to what we call de-risk assumptions, that they're making assumptions that a CISO is going to want to buy their product for X, Y, Z reasons. And it allows the customer immersion partner to give them the real feedback and say, what you're offering me, looks good, but I really don't like your licensing model, or the way you're delivering it is way off. I would never buy it through like a channel partner, for example. So it gives them that real feedback from customers who would actually use their stuff. Okay,
what about the investor roadshows?
The investor roadshows are kind of similar. where we set up meetings one-on-one with the startups and investors that exist in our network. In our network, we have about 1,000 or so, or maybe even more, investors that have worked with Dreamit in the past. We reach out to them and say, hey, these are our startups coming through the program. Which ones would you like to meet with? And we set up one-on-one interviews with the investors. We go on a bi-coastal roadshow. In the East Coast, we go to Philly, Boston, and New York, and D.C. in some cases. And then we go to the West Coast to Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And we set up these one-on-one meetings with the investors where they have about a half an hour to an hour to pitch them and kind of understand where they're coming from to see if they want to move on to maybe discussion of a term sheet. The goal is to have them raise a round of capital. So it is a pretty intensive tour. Most companies, I think the average last cohort, they have 19 meetings with investors, which is a lot in a 2-week time period. But it also gives a little bit of fear of missing out with the investors. So it gives a lot of pressure around the investors to kind of set up and close a deal or start a deal with a company because they know they're going to be talking to 18 or so other investors in that same time period. So it usually ends up very successful for our companies. So we have about a 50% raise rate. Within 6 months of going through the Dreamit program, about 50% of our companies raise capital.
So are there any drone companies in the current cohort?
We did go through and screen several drone companies, but none of them actually made it into the final round, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad. Can you talk about why they didn't make it into the cohort?
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope they keep getting them. I do like that field, but we look at the companies from several different dimensions. These few that came through, one of the issues were a lot of them were very early. We'd like to see some traction in the space because it is a pretty busy space. There's a lot of different competition in the space. So we want to see evidence that this particular company is going to move ahead of the pack. So that was one of the big ones, one of the big reasons. Some of them just didn't necessarily have a fully ready product yet. And the other bit of it was that the FAA regulations around some of the drone issues were pretty concerning. And that's something that's going to be completely out of our control. So, like, you have a couple of companies that were doing autonomous drone work. So completely, a pilot-free drone situation where they're able to fly the drone without having a pilot. That's not allowed right now by the FAA. I think that there was some concern that would be out of our control. And if they didn't get those regulations moved, which are supposed to happen in the next upcoming year or so, then that the investment wouldn't really be worth it because there would be no chance for the company to grow. So there just seems to be quite a few issues that were out of our control. But I think definitely going to look very closely next cycle. We have a lot of customer partners that are very interested in this, and some of our customer partners are actually military or government. So they're definitely interested in this. But the combination of not being ready and kind of the regulations getting in our way. So
what sort of things would you be looking for?
Some of the things we explored were, we had one company that was trying to make some headway in the United States, and they were out in California and Alaska on doing autonomous drone work on pipelines. But we said, well, why don't you try out South America? Where can you fly these drones autonomously and not have to deal with regulation? And it turns out you could actually do that in South America. And say, well, why don't you explore that or another country which would allow you to do that? And, a company that would be clever in that dimension would be very interesting to us. Similarly, if they did pilots with U.S.-based military or government entities and they were able to show that there was some interest there, right? Because we can't just, you want to be sure that this is the company that you're investing in, you're taking the program is going to be the one that's actually going to pull ahead of the pack when there's so many. And if there's no data, that's really tough.
Okay, so tell us about your background. How did you get involved in this field, and what brought you to SecureTech?
So my background is a history in the U.S. military, U.S. government. So I spent about 10 years total with government, 8 years or so in the Army, and about 2 years at the National Security Agency. So when I was in the Army, I did a lot of work with what's called signals intelligence. So I was an intelligence officer, and I worked in signals intelligence. In Iraq, I did 2 tours in Iraq, 1 long tour in Iraq, and I did a lot of work with counterterrorism, where we were some of the first troops to deploy some really interesting drone equipment, some drone collection equipment, which was really interesting. Obviously can't talk too much about it on this forum, but definitely have experience working with drones, or, what do we call them, unmanned aerial vehicles or unmanned aerial systems at that time, and working in that regard. Moved over to the NSA. We're kind of transitioned more into looking in offensive cyber type work and cyber security or cyber operations. I eventually left, started my own company, and sold it after a couple of years. Got into the private sector, worked at a few places like Bloomberg, and just coming from IBM, where I worked at IBM for 3 years as a product director and product manager. So definitely come from a lot of different angles to try to help our companies out. I come from an operator angle, from the physical side, physical security and cybersecurity side. I come from somebody who has been an entrepreneur and may had those struggles and had those sleepless nights as an entrepreneur, and also somebody who's worked at a very large organization as a product manager and completed a lot of international type sales and international go-to-market strategy, which you can do at IBM, which is really, really interesting. So that's where I come and help out the entrepreneurs. There's also a lot of other people on the team. Pretty much everybody else on the Dreamit team has also been an entrepreneur, and like the managing partners that work at Dreamit have multiple companies. So a lot of people have great advice and great strategies to help these companies out.
Were your unmanned missions primarily for intelligence gathering rather than for the delivery of munitions?
Did a few of the munition type stuff. I mean, I never led a unit or anything that was working with drones or unmanned aerial systems, but they were always supporting what I did. One of the programs that I worked with my unit in Iraq was kind of intelligence-led missions or intelligence-led operations, where we were targeting specific insurgent cells in Iraq using a variety of intelligence techniques. And we did leverage unmanned aerial systems in many different capacities, both in kind of a passive intel collection and offensive capacity during that time.
Do you have any companies in the cohort involved in the counter-drone area?
Not any here, but we definitely looked at a few. Those are really interesting to us. We actually met with one customer Immersion partner, a military person, who said, what I'm really interested in is counter-drone stuff. And they gave us kind of an assignment to be like, go see if you could find any for me. We did a kind of a little bit of a research study, and so we could find very interesting space, very interesting market. If any counter-drone companies are out there, we'd definitely love to talk. I think it's a really interesting stuff. There's some that look like they're more mature than others. But definitely a space that I could see growing in the next several years, and definitely of interest to invest in.
What's the schedule for this cohort, and when will companies be able to apply for the next?
So we have open applications, and you can just go to www.dreamit.com, and you can see the applications there, or say that you have interest, and we'll contact you. Just go to dreamit.com, and you'll see it. But we're going to concentrate on recruiting in earnest probably in early December. So as this cohort starts wrapping up and goes into their investor roadshow, we will start to really get heads down recruiting the next cohort. That'll probably happen in the December timeframe. And then the spring cohort will actually start in March.
For a UAV team thinking about SecureTech, what do they really have to do to put themselves in a favorable position for that December cohort?
They really have to have a crisp example of the problem they're solving, or I should say a crisp explanation of the problem they're solving, that it's solving, their problem and their solution actually match together, which, believe it or not, that doesn't always happen all the time. So that's kind of the first thing, and they have to show why their solution's different and better than everybody else's. What's the unique thing about their solution? A couple things that always trip people up are the total addressable market. We want to see that the total addressable market is over $1 billion in the U.S. alone. A lot of people can't kind of get to that logically for whatever reason. That's definitely very important for investors, so that's something we look at. And then traction. Either you don't have actual monetary traction, some type of pilots or somebody who's a potential customer said, yeah, I would buy this. That's definitely a very important thing for us.
What do you see as the key challenges in the drone industry today?
I think probably the biggest thing is regulation. There's regulation on the autonomous drone bit and, regulations on just flying in general. That's really the biggest thing. I think there's also challenges where much of the drone kind of ROI or offering or proposed value for many companies is, hey, you can replace these physical guards with drones, right? So there may be like an issue of replacing people and how that's actually going to work. So that can kind of come up as an issue every now and then.
Where is DreamIt based?
We're actually based in Philadelphia, and we have an office in New York as well, but we're primarily based in Philly. That's where most of our people are located. That's where I'm located. But we accept companies from literally across the world. I have a company in this cohort from Israel. So we have companies from Phoenix, a lot from DC area. I don't think we have any from the Philly area, and this one for me anyway, and a couple in New York as well. So yeah, they could be all over the world.
As a Tampa resident, I've learned that there's a connection between DreamIt and Tampa. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, if anybody wants to Google DreamIt and Tampa, there's a lot of information about that. But we have a very strong connection with Jeff Vinnick, who's helping revitalize Tampa. And he's one of the partners with us. And we have a lot of connections to our customer Immersion partners down in Tampa that we've been connected to. One in particular that's really interesting is SOFWorks, Special Operations Forces Works, which helps kind of bring new technology into the Special Forces. They are very interested in checking out our startups and seeing the new innovative stuff. So it's a really great opportunity for our startups to get in front of somebody like that.
Based on your experience as an entrepreneur, what advice or lessons learned would you offer to other entrepreneurs in the drone industry?
I would say do as much as you can with as little as you can, right? Be very scrappy. I think that's what a lot of people look for. Try to be very capital efficient. There was an example that our boss likes to talk about concerning Zappos. If you've ever heard of Zappos, a shoe company, online shoe company. And when they started the company, they literally had the assumption of, okay, well, people buy shoes online. This was in the early days of the internet. And they didn't say, okay, well, if people need to buy shoes online, we need to go out and get all these contracts and deals and work with Nike and Adidas. And then we have to buy 2 big warehouses on either coast and fill them with shoes and get all these salespeople. Like, they just went down to a Foot Locker and they took pictures of the shoes with a cheap digital camera, put it on a cheap website, and all of a sudden they were getting thousands of orders. They would go down to the Foot Locker, put the stuff in the mail, and send it to the people, right? So they kind of validated their assumptions early and cheaply. And that's really the most important and vital thing that you can do as an entrepreneur, not try to have the mentality of like, if I build it, they will come, which a lot of people do. And I did myself for a long time. You kind of get blocked in that mentality. So that's the one piece of advice that I would give.
Is there anything about SecureTech or DreamIt that we missed?
I think we pretty much covered everything. If anybody's interested, just go to DreamIt.com. You can check it out. You could follow me on Twitter at Bob Stasio, and feel free to reach out. I'm just at bob@dreamit.com, and I'm happy to chat with you.
And for my final question, Bob, ultimately, what impact do you hope SecureTech will have on the industry?
I think the greatest impact is getting really innovative technologies into the hands of big companies quicker, where a lot of working at some larger companies, it can take a while for them to innovate, and it's like turning a battleship, right? It just takes a long time, where I think what we can do is get this technology to market a lot quicker than it could, and that's what I'm really excited about.
That's it for episode 177 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Bob Stasio of DreamIt SecureTech. I want to thank Bob for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about SecureTech or want to connect with Bob, check out the webpage at DreamIt.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the costs of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate or patreon.com/droneradioshow. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.